partnership. Now, Africa is the world's largest continent, both in terms of land and population, with 55 countries, which account for almost 15% of the world's human population. India and Africa have a long and rich history of interaction, marked by cultural, economic, and political exchanges based on the principle of South-South cooperation. In recent years, a number of steps have been taken to further and strengthen these relations. Speaking at the valedictory session of the National Conference on India-Africa Relations in the Changing Global Order, Vice President Venkaiah Naidu has said that India and Africa have a lot common interest and both have vital stakes in each other's progress, peace and prosperity. For more on this as to how both can further their relations, we have a distinguished panel of guests in the studio today. Let me start by introducing these guests to you, beginning with Dr. T.C.A. Raghavan, former Ambassador and Director General of ICWA. I also have with us Mr. Suresh K. Goyal, another former Ambassador who has been in South Africa as well, and Mr. Rajendra Harshe, the visiting professor from Department of International Relations of South Asia University and former Vice Chancellor of Allahabad University as well. Let me begin with you, Mr. Raghavan, to try and, look at this in a holistic perspective. The India-Africa relations, it has a historic perspective as well. But the way times have changed now, where do we stand and how do we move forward from here onwards?
Well, this was really the theme of the conference, which, as you referred to, the Vice President of India delivered the valedictory address at. The conference was organized by the Indian Council of World Affairs, which itself has a very old history of focusing on Africa. And the three main issues which this conference discussed was that how do India and Africa remodel relations, remodel excellent bilateral relations as it happens, in a global matrix which is changing very rapidly. The second theme was more about the specifics of the dynamics of India's relations with different countries in the African continent. And thirdly, and most importantly, in the conference was the question of what is of assessing the status of African studies in India, because you cannot. And this is something which the Vice President in his speech also emphasized at some length, that you cannot embark on a major bilateral engagement without it having a substantive intellectual and academic engagement at the base. So how do we evaluate the status of African studies in India? This was the third broad theme which the conference addressed. The conclusion was that there are numerous opportunities and a great deal of potential in India-Africa relations, but we need to move very quickly to harness that potential, because for two reasons. Firstly, the African continent itself is changing a great deal. It has some of the fastest growing economies in the world. It has huge natural resources, from hydrocarbons to precious metals and many others. But also there is a renewed interest in other major economies in the African continent for various reasons. In fact, some of the participants in the conference spoke about a second or third scramble for Africa. But the fact is, the conclusion was that India, given the fact that it has such a rich historical and civilizational relationship with South Africa, should move quickly to harness the huge potential which exists in India-Africa relations.
Okay, so the time for both India and Africa to go ahead and move quickly and harness those relations. Let me bring in Ambassador Goyal here as well. Quite a lot of issues and quite a lot of commonalities as well, as has been expressed by Ambassador Raghavan and has been pointed out time and again. See, if you look at the issue of security, regional security as well, then trade, also, climate change, sustainable development, and, people-to-people engagement as well. So in all these aspects, there's quite a lot to be done, Mr. Goyal.
Absolutely. Let me start from where Ambassador Raghavan left, really. I think the conference, of course, went over a huge number of issues to explore how, in the present day environment ecosystem, how can the relations between India and the countries in Africa can be progressed further. Now, I have spent quite a lot of time in Africa. I spent 4 years in Egypt and 3 years in South Africa, and therefore, one thing that strikes you is that Africa is not one unitary entity. We cannot look at Africa as one overall solution for all the countries.
A lot of diversities.
A lot of diversities. We have to look at each country in a different manner. Number two, we keep on talking about the civilizational historical relations, which are important because they have developed the kind of confidence and the trust which is necessary for taking the relationship further. But now the time has come to move further and not remain anchored in the historical and the civilizational relationship. Gandhi ji is very, very important. He was the messiah of peace, non-violence, etc., etc. These days, African economies are aspirational economies. They want to come up to the same level as, if not the first world, at least where India is now, if not today, at least in 10 years' time, 15 years' time. That is where the 2063 plan really talks about, to grow as the economy. And they're looking for countries which can actually become partners in this aspirational goal. Therefore, given the kind of diversity, South Africa is a very different kind of an economy, Kenya is a very different kind of economy. We need to focus in this partnership, firstly, to my mind, on the economic growth, economic partnership, industrial partnership, find the synergies where we can work together. The previous various visits by the Prime Minister and the President have gone on to that areas and worked out the modalities. The time is to really work on those projects and deliver on them.
Okay.
Number one. Number two, security is a very, very important part of the overall relationship. There is a contest between different countries in entering into that kind of equation. We need to be careful in those areas, maintain our own security interest without creating a kind of a sense that there is a contest. It's a very delicate situation because those contests can then play up further on their own insecurities. So we need to develop on those kind of linkages very carefully in a manner that it not only cements the trust further, but it also works to the mutual advantage of the two of African countries and India.
Okay.
Thirdly, I would say is human resource development. Now, the number of the African students who come and study in India is a very, very important part of that relationship. We need to work more diligently on that to ensure that those who come from Africa to study here, they go back to their country as our ambassadors, as representatives of India who can talk highly of India. It used to happen in the past. We need to make sure that we can go back to the same kind of situation again.
Okay, so these all are the aspects. Professor Harshay, let me bring you in here. And, if you look at both the African continent as well as India, it accounts for almost 1/3 of the world's humanity. So, very much the reason for both India and Africa to go ahead and collaborate with each other and move further, ensure that each other's interests are taken care of.
Absolutely. Now, I'll tell you a few things. One is, we have to take a differentiated view of Africa. There is Anglophone Africa, there is Francophone Africa, there is Lusophone Africa. And with Anglophone African countries, we have traditional relationships of trade, business and other ties. Francophone Africa, we are just trying to build up, and Lusophone Africa also we are trying to build up. The issues that are there at hand, I think one important area is trade, which is the mounting. So trade which was negligible in the 1990s, today we are crossed $65 billion. Similarly, another important area I think which needs to be kind of given attention is security. And somewhere kind of India has both security in terms of African country security, where India can go and train up their people. They have been trained in the past in NDA, Khadakwasla and other places. But energy security is also a very important area. And India already is trying to import oil from Sudan, Angola, Nigeria and entire Gulf of Guinea region. And this energy security is important because number of countries from West Asia, they are going through such instability that we can't entirely rely on them. Although Iran, Iraq, UAE, Saudi Arabia, they continue to be supporting, they continue to support oil.
And several African nations are also part of the, the Solar Alliance, which is
yes,
India's.
indeed, they are part of the Solar Alliance. So this energy security African countries we can enhance. Another problem related to security is, we have to have maritime perspective. India always had maritime perspective, but after Modi's visit in Seychelles, Mozambique, Tanzania, we are particularly interested in Southwest Indian Ocean countries. And somewhere if you look at our trade, I think pirates from Somalia, they tried to intercept and create problems for India. Other kind of set of areas which I thought I would emphasize. One out of that is, there is way to learn from each other a great deal. Like in South Africa, they established TRC, the commission where apartheid, South Africa, where it was abolished. White man went there and also apologized for what he did, and black man pardoned him. Now, this is something like an interesting give and take, and such experiment we can learn from Africa, which we are not learning. Similarly, African countries like Nigeria or larger countries, Zaire or Congo, they can learn how federal experiment can work in India, how democracy works in India. There is also mutual gain possible between the two. Similarly, I would consider that youth, Africa is people of country, all countries are young people in Africa. We are also young people, and most of them want to be well equipped as far as IT is concerned, IT field, and they say we don't want to be passengers on IT industry, we want to be drivers and not passengers. So there are several, Narayan Murthy also visited these parts. So there are many ways in which we need to link up Africa further, because in terms of raw materials, in terms of associations which are of past, in terms of linking up leaders like Gandhi, Mandela, Nehru, Nkrumah, we have kind of modern history also which is together, anti-colonial, anti-racist, anti-imperialist, and we have also post-colonial history where post-colonial states are being built, nations are being built, and this can be, India can become a very major country for them, an anchor. Okay. And India ought to go there, as China is already there with such overwhelming presence. If China can establish Confucian institutions in different African universities, India also has to take lead and do something interesting so that our kind of culture gets known there. Diaspora is there to help you. Bollywood films are there to help you. There are many ways in which Indian presence can be kind of acknowledged, it can increase, and large number of people who are competent in India can be sent as teachers. Many years ago, best of the English language teachers in Ethiopia came from India. So there are many pleasant memories they have, and similarly, as Ambassador Goel was saying, that when African students come to study here, we have to treat them with respect, because when they go back, they must have very pleasant memories of India, and that we must be bearing in mind.
Okay, so quite a lot of commonality and linkages, and need to go ahead and build further there as well. Let me bring you, Mr. Raghavan, again here, and three aspects which need to be explored further and build on further, as all of you are saying, is one, trade; two, regional security; and third, if I may add agriculture as well.
Well, agriculture has certainly a lot of potential, because these are many of the African countries are those with large arable areas which they are not using. They have food security issues. This is an area where there is almost a perfect complementarity with India, because we have a population, also skilled population, where agricultural production is concerned, and finally large market for the products, and for also certain capacities in processing that product. So this is an area for as I said, as a perfect complementarity. I think the issue which we have to focus on is a much more specific one. That if you are talking about Indians farming large farms in one or the other African country, I think the government has to think about constructing some kind of vehicle or special purpose vehicle which will make such an investment possible.
Okay.
Because it is, I think, too large a venture to be left to one firm or one corporate on its own. That may well happen, and in fact it is happening. But I think to multiply those instances, we do need to think of what is the best possible template or best possible vehicle we can develop for this purpose.
So that it can be done on a large scale.
On a large scale.
It can then have that desired effect. Mr. Goel, on the regional security issue, that's quite significant, both for India and for African nations as well, especially in the maritime domain.
Absolutely. The regional security, particularly the Indian Ocean framework, has captured the imagination of countries, the maritime countries there, Djibouti, etc., etc. So, and we need to focus on that area. But as I said, that we should develop that security connection in a manner that it is not seen as a contest or a conflict of interests, but that it is seen as a partnership in promoting the security of those maritime nations in Africa. one example would be, rather than thinking in terms of contest, let us think in terms of anti-terrorism coalition, piracy. Now, those are the issues with which those countries have been grappling for a long time. And if you recall, some years ago, when the Indian ships were able to actually get those ships, those ships which had been hijacked, freed again, they were quite delighted with that kind of cooperation. So I think we need to focus on the areas where there is a stake and a common interest between India and those countries. And to my mind, anti-terrorism and piracy would be one of the two issues. Indian Ocean as an area of security is gathering traction again. We need to work on that concept. For the time being, I think we need to look at Indian Ocean as an issue of economic cooperation rather than just security.
Okay.
I would like to just add one point here beyond security. I think economic cooperation, investment, including energy, including infrastructure, should also be considered as a part of building the security collaborations really.
Okay. So trade should also be further moved ahead.
Investments.
In respect.
Infrastructure.
Professor Harshad, if you look at, you spoke about cultural linkages, people-to-people exchanges, how students from, Africa can end up becoming brand ambassadors, India's brand ambassadors, as well as Ambassador Goyal also pointed out. But in these two aspects, that is trade and regional security, how do you see that there is a potential which needs to be further built upon?
Yes, there is a kind of great deal of complementarity of interest between African countries and India. And several things India really requires in terms of raw materials, like uranium from South Africa. There is gold, there is plutonium. In Zimbabwe also, it's a very rich country. Copper-rich countries are there, like Zambia. So and India can give finished products in turn. So there is that asymmetric relationship where India has some kind of edge, and also India can cultivate that even further. Security ties will continue to be important because you raised the point, and I'll just take it because Ambassador Goyal just referred to terror. I think there are two major terrorist organizations which are operating in Africa. One is Boko Haram in the entire West African region, and another is Al-Shabaab in the East African region. They are playing havoc. But most interesting part is they are connected to Al-Qaeda, which is a very major multinational terrorist organization, and which in its turn is connected to Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed of Pakistan. So terror can be one of the very important rallying points, as Ambassador Goyal was arguing, and on that we can work together. Along with terror, there are several issues like cyber security, several things will follow once you work on it. Second thing that I thought I ought to say is that, look, India's business and its attitude also has been changing. First of all, large number of them, whether it's Maruti or Mahindra, Tatas, they are all there. Kirloskar, they are there in South Sudan if you go, Angola. But most important thing which kind of interested me was Tata's one statement, that he says, if I invest elsewhere outside India, it is also my way of nation building. So the notion of nation building of Nehruvian times and notion of nation building post-reform, I think Indian business has become also aggressive. Multinational firm is not a monopoly of particular Western country or Japan, but
they also become brand ambassadors.
Absolutely, they are brand ambassadors, and that will kind of, suppose they do business well, whether it's in Nigeria, whether in South Africa, or in French Africa, somewhere India will have a good image too. As far as culture part is concerned, much can be kind of happening in that front. We have not worked sufficiently on it because Indian diaspora somewhere, they are looking at their roots, and again they want to get back to India in some form. As to how they imagine and think of India, one can't work out, but still they want to get back. So we have to exploit that, because everywhere, I'll tell you, just in the morning we had discussion, one movie called Hum Aapke Hai Kaun, which came in 1991 after reform, it earned us very major foreign exchange reserves. Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge. So Bollywood industry is one part of culture, but they enjoy Ravi Shankar sitar, they enjoy many other things. And this link also, if it is established, people will feel one with India.
Okay.
And also African culture also we have to understand and interact with it. That will also make us happier. We will have rhythm, we will have also human warmth, and many other things.
Communitarian ways of traditional and cultural linkages there as well. Let's have a quick concluding comments from Ambassador Raghavan and Ambassador Goyal there as well on the way forward from here on.
Well, the way forward is to build on the already strong base which exists. It is not as if we are starting from ground zero. We have already made substantial achievements, but we need to step on the gas in terms of establishing more diplomatic missions, which is being done, but it has to be done in a sustained way. We need to send out more trade missions. There needs to be continuous high-level engagement, including summit-level engagements. And most of all, and finally, we must have a sustained effort to develop study of Africa in Indian research institutions and Indian universities.
Okay, Mr. Goel?
Let me go back to what I wanted to say first. Since I've been DG ICCR, so culture comes to me very naturally, and therefore what he said.
Professor Harsh has pointed out
yes,
twice. Yeah.
You see, we have this tendency in India to think of India as a cultural superpower. We gave the world Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Countries in Africa, particularly, which have been the crucible of civilization, please remember that it is believed to be the continent where the human race evolved really. They particularly push back at that kind of a thought. So we need to build partnerships, collaborations. And there are fabulous ideas for such collaboration, which I've seen in Africa in my days, where the rhythm and the harmony and the from India and Africa comes together to truly demonstrate how close the human races in India and Africa have been. I think we need to do that, number one.
Okay.
And number two, we need to basically focus on the contemporary areas of collaboration. And to my mind, the most important areas are economy, investment, infrastructure development, human resource.
Okay, so there it is. As our panelists have pointed out, the partnership between India and Africa has a strong traditional and historical base, and there are common grounds, common linkages between both, that is India and Africa. Time to build on them further from here onwards, be it culture, be it security, or areas like trade, technology, or agriculture. We'll come back again tomorrow with a different topic and different set of guests. Till then, keep watching Rajyasabha Television.
Traditionally in India, various rituals have been followed by the people to propitiate the deities and to bring peace and harmony. One such practice to ward off evil spirits is the drawing of colourful patterns called rangoli on the floor at the entrance of a house. Since times unknown, they have been a common feature in various festivities across the country. Legend has it that long ago the son of a renowned king died. Lord Brahma, the creator of the universe, requested the king to make a painting of the boy so that he could bring him back to life again. This is how the first rangoli was made, using ground rice and pulses. This is just one of the many folk tales about the origin of the traditional art, and there are many more.
கல்ச்சர்னே சொல்லலாம். இது ரொம்ப இம்பார்ட்டண்ட்டாக அந்த காலத்துல இருந்தே இருக்குது.